Hey, Christian leader, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation in this community with us. Listen, one of the most incredible ways that you can help serve in this journey together would be to like or subscribe, to share it with a friend, because in that journey, we actually equip one another. We connect each other to the larger movement and body of Christ. At the International Leadership Institute, this is what we've been doing for more than 25 years, walking alongside leaders, building connections, and helping them to learn what it is to leave a legacy of Christ-like leadership, not only in their own lives and families, but truly in their nations, in their communities, and around the world. This is helpful to you. Doing those three simple steps, liking, sharing, subscribing, and maybe even committing to share with a friend, that's how we're going to see the kingdom advance, more leaders equipped, and ultimately God glorified. Our promise to you, we're going to continue to bring some incredible conversations, topics that are meaningful, helpful, useful for your life, for your leadership, and then connect you to the stories of Christian leaders around the world who are faithfully fulfilling the Great Commission. I know they'll be transformational for me, just like they're transformational for you, and together we'll see the kingdom advance. Really looking forward to today's conversation with Norval. Hey, Norval, I'm excited because today I want to talk about something that's, it's just really near and dear to my heart. It's something that I think about a lot. I think we live in a world, in a day and age where, celebrity and charisma and even kind of performance or being a performer has been so celebrated. But when I think about leading, I think about all of the examples where those things have just resulted in really an abject failure. One kind of silly example, but there's this piece of technology not long ago, and I'm kind of a techie person. It was called the Rabbit AI, and it was meant to be this little piece of technology that would sit in your pocket. And like so many things before it, people were just raving, right? People were going, man, this thing's going to be so great. It's going to be so big. It's going to have such a great impact. It had all the headlines. It had so many venture capital groups backing it. It had all of the pomp and circumstance of something that was on the rise. And then when the product actually came, people looked at it and they realized that it was a paper tiger, right? Like it wasn't what it had shown itself to be, right? It was all talk and no actual substance to the matter. And I think in leadership, we often see that same story lived out as charisma rather than leaders with Christ-like character. I feel like in the day and age that we live in, there's so much of that energy, but there's the lack of the real substance that has to come with it.
Well, we know each other through photoshopped Instagram profiles.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's who we think people are.
Mm-hmm.
And that same thing happens to leaders.
Yeah.
Perfectly made up, airbrushed, and only the best moments. And that, even more than charisma, that is a spun, a narrative that is spun about how much charisma I have.
Yeah.
And because there is value in charisma.
Sure.
It's not totally negative if we recognize that even the best charisma is short-lived.
Well, and that's where I think, charisma, it does something beautiful to mobilize people and to engage people. It causes that quick spike. But I think a danger that's often overlooked with that is it can really mask flaws. We can be an incredibly charismatic leader and not have those imperfections that we do carry. We can begin to lie to ourselves and miss those because our charisma has garnered us that early success that begins to make us believe that we've got it all figured out, and that's where pride can really begin to creep in and really undo us as leaders. So Norval, as I reflect on that, really the question I've got to ask is what does that character development look like? Like how do I step into that? If I want to be a leader with character and not just a leader with an initial or shallow charisma, what are some of the early steps or stages that I can walk in that are going to help me develop that?
Well, if anybody should think that developing leaders of character is a secondary issue or is even important but not quite, I had the privilege of participating in the largest gathering of Christians probably in the last 10, 15 years, the Lausanne Congress that was held in Seoul, Korea, in October of last year. I can't believe it's almost a year.
Yeah, man.
And I was there, and there were 6,000 other Christians and another 5,000 that were connecting online. So it's a pretty large crowd. And we were all given the opportunity to choose an issue to collaborate with, to talk about.
Okay.
And so there were all kinds of issues, social issues and evangelism issues, unreached people group issues, missionary issues. And obviously, there was one called Developing Leaders of Character. And being that we're a leadership development organization, I felt that's the most natural connection for me.
Yeah.
And I signed up for it. Well, as it turned out, it was the largest by far group in the entire Congress. We filled a very large ballroom. It was very difficult to conduct because it was supposed to be a quote unquote small group. But I don't know, we had hundreds of leaders, of men and women who felt like the biggest challenge, or the challenge they should be involved, was developing leaders of character. And it was the most popular subject and considered the most relevant. And it was exactly, we talked a lot about charisma. It was exactly what we started this conversation about, talking about the flaws, the inherent flaws of charisma in a fallen, sinful world. And so, to me, that in and of itself is an indication of the importance of the subject, of that primacy of charisma over, leader character over charisma. And interestingly enough, a lot of the groups came to the conclusion that what the church needs to do from now on, so that the next generation of leaders will be leaders of more character than charisma, is to invest in a Bible-centered, gospel-centered, Jesus-centered disciple making.
Man, well, so again, we're looking at this, and you got an incredible group of people together, and their conclusion is, we've got to help people follow in the way of Jesus. If we want to see leaders with character, the first step is to disciple them in the ways and practices of Jesus.
And not only that, in the entire plenary session, we did one of those online surveys with those word clouds.
Oh yeah.
So we all put the most important things that we felt the church needed to do. And prayer became a big one. But then discipleship started growing. And by the end, that particular crowd of 6,000 plus people, the word that most showed up in people's response to their survey was discipleship.
Well,
I think making disciples.
I think that's a response that really points to the question in a lot of the church today, I think is looking at, and a question for a lot of leaders today, how do I have a long-term win rather than a short-term win, right? You look at the S&P 500, 60 years ago, the average age of a company on the S&P 500 was like 73 years, okay? You look at it today, and it's like a 23-year-old company, which means it started after the year 2000, which is kind of mind-boggling to think about, because there's been just such a shift toward the immediate, toward the fastest answer, the quickest response. But as a Christian leader, we want to see longevity. The examples from Scripture point to much longer timelines and much longer timescales that God's interested in.
We are the church. We are a 2,000-year-old endeavor, right?
I mean, what better example than that? You're absolutely right.
So a 2,000-year-old movement requires we're not going to have 2,000-year-old leaders except for Jesus, but it requires leaders that will lead through a lifetime and into the next generation.
Well, and I think the reason why we emphasize and why we see such a need for that character development is because with that kind of momentum, with that kind of a movement, we've got to build trust. And that trust and that that trust comes with character, with integrity, with those aspects lived out over time. And they really help you to respond in the midst of crisis. If you have sincere, consistent character, as crisis, which is inevitable in an organization, as that crisis comes, you're going to see that character meet the need and help to lead and really cover some of the imperfections that come up in the midst of crisis.
Yes.
And that's why I think we see this longing, especially coming out of COVID and all the crisis that we've seen globally. There's this, I think, renewed longing for character and integrity that allows for that leadership to carry through the crisis and through the hard moments.
In fact, the conversation about character is not a Christian conversation.
Yeah.
It is everywhere. But okay, so how do we do that in a practical way?
Yeah.
I want to be a leader of character. What are some things that we can do? The first one that comes to my mind is our final core value out of the 8 is integrity.
Yeah.
And we define integrity, in essence, if I could define it in one phrase, is a consistency between who I am, what I stand on, the truth that I stand on, and my actions.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I can think of is if I can align what I believe with how I act. And in private and in public.
Yeah.
Because if I do not practice integrity in the secret place, my integrity in the public place will be manipulation and fake.
And I think the contemporary Christian leader needs to acknowledge there are a lot of pressures to not show those losses, those failures, those shortcomings. And so what becomes easy is to have attitude, thought, word, and actions not align because not everyone sees all of them, right? And so in again, even our most public of personas, right, our social media accounts, the thing that gets the most viewership about us, we can show and say and demonstrate a lot of really good things, but those actions aren't seen by that same audience. And then again, in private, we might have actions that are seen, but the words don't necessarily have to align because they may not see all the other spaces that we're in. And so it gives us a unique, again, the modern context we're in gives us a unique opportunity to divorce our words and our actions from one another so that we can, again, have this perception, this personification of, oh, everything's all together. But the reality is unfortunately much darker.
But here's the thing, though. Because so many of us live our lives in the public eye today, much more with social media, much more than before, because it was what was true of high-profile leaders that were on TV or that were on the news. Now is any local pastor has an Insta profile, and you know, any local leader is living and leading in the eyes of the public through social media. So, but the counterpart is that at the same time, and this is something that we can learn to do, and we can begin to practice it in the day-to-day, is to not try to Photoshop our profiles and be transparent. I think the word I wanted to get to it, and took me a little longer, but was transparency.
Yeah.
And I think we all build a wall like a I don't mean a wall of separation, but a wall like a wall where you pin your photos and you pin your images. We all create remember, Facebook used to call the wall.
Yeah.
So we all have that wall. If that wall is transparent to where our true selves can be seen, that could be a good start.
Well, I think that's an incredible start. And it's important to note that we build that wall because we have a perception, we have a belief that we have to perform, that we have to, kind of meet some set of expectations, or I guess really, it's probably, again, pride. Pride sits behind so many doors. I really think we put up that wall because we feel the need to impress. We feel the need to look a certain part, right? We have a pretty common phrase in the States: fake it until you make it. Fake it till you make it. This idea that you just got to put up that front, but that doesn't produce the kind of longevity. It isn't serving of others. It's actually self-serving. And so we've got to fight that desire to impress, and instead we've got to look at the longevity, the endurance, and the long-lasting impact that character makes over the long run. There are countless examples, I think, both in Scripture and in just in the larger world around us, where that slow growth, right, actually is a demonstration of the character of some of the leaders, and it isn't flashy, it isn't immediate, it isn't this flash in the pan, it isn't an overnight success. It's the overnight success that was 20 years in the making, right? Mm-hmm. You think about, how much was David's character in the Scriptures, how much was David's character being formed in the midst of the wilderness while he was being chased by Saul, while he was surrounded by just the few guys that were going to stay with him and surround him and encourage him and strengthen him and run back to his town to get some water. David had a very different experience than Saul, and yet God chose to bring his own son through the line of David.
Yes.
And though Saul was tall and had killed his thousands, right? He had done mighty things. He lacked the character that was necessary to lead the nation on into the future.
To endure.
That's right.
And that is where the flashy Saul didn't endure. The little David with his harp and his sheep and his slingshot, was the one who succeeded, because, and he wasn't without flaws. Being a leader of character is not being perfect.
Yeah.
Except in the sense, be perfect as your Father is perfect. But that's not perfection in an absolute sense. I mean, gosh, sometimes I say, if I was God, I wouldn't choose David as a man after my own heart, because he more than once
made plenty of mistakes.
He made plenty of mistakes and compounded mistakes, but his heart was in God.
And I think that's the lesson for us today, is own those mistakes, right? Yes.
Own
them and own them transparently. That's what we could do today to combat those initiatives, to say, how do I remain in a position as a leader with character? Own the mistakes. Understand that it's not that we don't have mistakes, that we're going to own them. We're going to lead transparently in the midst of them. And we're going to set that kind of example in front of the people, which requires us as leaders to have grace, not only for the people we're leading, but even for ourselves.
Right. And that would be the second practical insight of the whole leaders of character issue. You want to be a leader of character, you will make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Make no mistake, you will make mistakes, but own them. If we have the courage to own our mistakes and learn to apologize, it's amazing how many people have somehow or another lost the ability to apologize, or they don't feel the need to apologize.
Yeah, I think we end up living in our own heads, having conversations with ourselves more than we end up with the people that we actually are leading or influencing. And again, I think that comes from that celebration of the celebrity, right? Where it's this idea that I can just have my have my place where I'm posting, and it's a billboard, it's a megaphone, and it's not a place where any of those private kind of conversations are had. But if we want to have that kind of legacy that reflects transformational movements, that reflects the most, high caliber and high quality organizations and leaders, it's gonna have to be built from a faithful development of character in self. As you're saying already, we know that's going to be character based on the person of Christ. It's going to be in discipleship relationships. It's going to be character that is lived out with transparency, with authenticity, that demonstrates acknowledgement of error, that owns mistakes, that leads other people in that same kind of practice and action. But I think my question is when I'm leading out of that character and it feels like I'm not making a whole lot of movement. You had a statement that you made earlier about how, charisma is kind of like a honeymoon, but character is kind of like interest. And I just can't get that out of my head, because there are moments where when you're investing, you don't see the immediate return, but that compound interest really adds up over time. How do you keep the emotional discipline of investing in character when it feels like those returns don't come as quickly as you want?
Like we joked about us, we're part of a 2,000-year-old movement. I think the awareness that this is a marathon.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look at leadership as a 100-meter dash.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the 100 meters, because if you're not totally focused and paid attention to it, you miss it.
Fair.
Because it's 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And it takes an incredible amount of strength, but it's a different kind of strength.
Yeah.
On the other hand, where you really see the character of an athlete is when they have to run 42 kilometers for hours, running and trying to keep ahead of the guy behind him.
Yeah.
And here's the interesting thing. The biggest stories that you hear or that you see in images are these people coming into the final stretch of the marathon, and they can barely walk.
Yeah.
They've lost body
mass just in the run.
Well, they lost their mind-body coordination.
Oh, yeah.
They're like running sideways. They fall, but there's something in there. There's that character. There's that
determination,
integrity, determination.
Yeah.
We love to tell the story of John Stephen Akwari, who hurt his knee in the middle of the marathon, but finished nonetheless, wobbly and bloody. And then when interviewed, he said, "My country didn't send me here 8,000 miles to start a race. They sent me here to finish the race." And so that Paul said, "Not that I've achieved, I forget what's behind, and I press on towards what's ahead." That focus, Hebrews, I let go of all the sin and all the weight, and I run the race with my eyes focused on the prize. I think that single focus on the prize is one of the things. There's more. It's one of the things, one of the areas that can help
give us that discipline.
Give us that discipline to focus on character, focus on the long run. Yeah. And if the results don't come yet, we persevere.
Well,
until they do, and here's the thing. Sometimes they will come in the next generation we won't see. There are people who've invested their entire lives only to see the result come in the next generation. My mind goes to Nate Saint and Jim Elliott and,
Yeah.
and the other guys
That's right.
who gave their lives to reach the Waodani Indians in Ecuador. They never saw the results. They invested, they went, they did it, but then their wives
Reaped the reward.
reaped the reward after they were done. And of course, we imagine them when we read the scripture about the great cloud of witnesses.
Yeah.
We figured that they
They're
were there
celebrating.
cheering their
Oh,
wives
yeah.
on, and their son, Steve, whom I had the privilege of seeing many years ago, talking to the Waodani native that had killed his father. They were together, talking about the power of the gospel, and that. So a lot of times, we got to realize there is a possibility. There is a distinct possibility that we will not see the breakthrough in our generation, but we press on.
Amen. Well, I think that's such an encouragement to me as we look at those things, right? We can see the fire that charisma brings, the energy, the excitement, the momentum, and we see that as a gift, but it's a gift, it's a fire, it's not the foundation. That Christ-like character has to be the foundation. And you're right, we must trust and see and remember and rejoice that in that sowing, God is reaping a harvest, a hundredfold of what we might be able to produce out of our own charisma or ability.
And one more thing, Daniel. Have you ever heard the saying that it's lonely up at the top?
Yeah.
Leaders are lonely. But that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because another probably one of the most important aspects of this leading with character is that you will only lead with character if you're not alone. We will only lead with character if we're surrounded by a community that will support us, to whom we are accountable, who will be able to call us on our sin.
That's right.
Or our flaws. You know, every David needs a Nathan.
That's right.
Right? David went out there and did all the junk, the terrible stuff that he did. I'm not going to say it, but those who know the story know about Bathsheba, and then him killing her husband and marrying her. And then Nathan, prophet, comes and confronts David. And every David needs a Nathan.
We got to have that community. We've got to surround ourselves with it. That's what's going to hold us close, give us the accountability we need for the kind of character that Christ calls us to. And I think that's why he told us to be in community. And the scriptures remind us, right, not to forsake the gathering of the body for that benefit and many others. Well, as always, Norval, I think there's so much that we can learn and grow together. I love that we're able to reflect on what it looks like to be leaders with character. And I think you're right. That gathering was a global gathering about a year ago of some of the most influential Christian leaders from around the world, sitting down and having a conversation to understand what is the state of the gospel, how do we move it forward, and that remains a key question today. How do we equip, develop, and disciple leaders with Christ-like character? I'm thankful to be in that journey with you here at ILI and to be able to serve and equip those leaders all around the world.
It's such a privilege for us to do even a small part.
Yeah.
In that discipleship process. One of the things we've been talking about a lot is how equipping leaders is the work of discipleship, because after all, we're all apprentices under Jesus.
That's right.
Anyway.
Right.
And it's just that some of us have been at it a little longer, and we can help those who are coming behind us, even to the next generation, to continue on the legacy that our Lord Jesus started with 12 guys and a bunch of women and some others 2,000 years ago.
So
still going.
That's right. Still going. Love it. As always, Norval, thanks for a great conversation today, man.
Awesome.
Yeah.